Hello, and welcome to the Regional Housing Council meeting. We'll start out with introductions. And why don't we start with Tumwater this week?
Hi, Michael Althauser, member of Tumwater City Council. I'm joined by Brad Medrud, our planning manager, and scrolling to see if we're also joined by Councilmember Kathy. I think not at the moment, but I think she might be joining us in a few minutes if she hasn't gotten the opportunity to dial in yet. Happy to be here.
And why don't we go to Yelm next?
Hi, Carolyn. Yeah, Gary Cooper here from Yelm. My video is not working. I'm not being antisocial.
Okay. Are you expecting a council member today?
I really do not know. I would like to let you know that starting next month, we will have a new representative from Yelm, Councilman Trevor Palmer.
A new elected representative or a staff?
New elected rep.
Okay.
Yes.
You don't know who that is yet?
No, yeah, I do. It's Trevor Palmer.
Okay.
I'll get the contact info to everybody.
Okay, great. All righty. Let's go next to Olympia.
Hi, all. Danny Madrone with the Olympia City Council, joined by Mayor Pro Tem Clark Gilman and Darian Lightfoot and Jacinda Stelgis.
Awesome. Thanks. Hi, guys. All right. Not seeing Commissioner Mejia yet, so let's go to Lacey. I'm Carolyn Cox from Lacey City Council. We have here our planning manager, Ryan Andrews, and is that it, Ryan? Am I missing somebody?
Looks like that's it for Lacey today.
Okay, great. And then I guess, Tom, you want to take the lead on Thurston County?
Sure. Tom Webster, Senior Program Manager of the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention for Thurston County. And we also have Keely Marino, who's our Homeless Response Manager, Lisa Sparkman, who's our Communications Specialist, and Cody Anderson, who is support today. And I expect Commissioner Mejia will be joining us shortly.
Okay, thank you. And we have some advisory committee leaders today. Talana, would you like to introduce yourself and your committee?
Sure, thank you. Talana Reed, the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee.
Great. And Kaven?
Good afternoon. I'm Kaven Hill. I'm the vice chair of the Homeless Services Advisory Board.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And I see Councilmember Kathy from Tumwater has joined us. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you. Thank
Glad
you.
you're here. Have we missed anybody? Okay, hearing none, let's get started with approval of the, well, I guess we have to adopt our agenda. Are there any, can I have a motion? And does anybody have changes? Keely?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair Cox, but our chair of the Homeless Services Advisory Board is in the attendees, and
Oh,
so I
okay.
don't know if Cody, you wouldn't mind promoting Tammy. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, thank you. I was worried about missing somebody. Okay, is Tammy on screen yet?
Yes.
All right. So Tammy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you see me and hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Tammy Smith. I am the chair of the Housing Services for the Homeless Services Advisory Board.
Great. Well, welcome to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? I'll second it. All righty. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, and nobody on waiting on phone? I guess not. All righty, thank you. So moving on, we have a Thurston Regional Planning Council housing allocation presentation. I'm told that Michael Ambrogi is out sick. Is Allison Osterberg? Is she in attendance yet, and has she been promoted?
We're promoting her now.
Okay, so Allison will be doing the presentation. As soon as we can beam her in.
She should be in.
There she is. Hi, Allison, and welcome.
Thank you.
I hear you're going to be doing the whole presentation today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Allison Osterberg. I'm the planning manager at Thurston Regional Planning Council, and I'm pinch hitting today for my colleague Michael Ambrogi, who did a lot of the work on this project that I'm going to talk about. And so just bear with me. I have very good notes, but I'm your second best presenter on this, and so I will be probably calling in some reinforcements from some of the staff who also worked on this project. So I am here today to present some regional work that's been done to look at to respond to state legislation. That'll be a new requirement as part of the Growth Management Act, and it'll apply to comprehensive plan updates that call for the need to do a better job of thinking about how we're planning ahead for housing at different income streams. And so let me just share my presentation. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Great. So this, the planning effort analysis that I'm going to talk about, we've been working on it in response to a change in state law that came about in 2021. House Bill 1220 made a number of changes to the requirements for local jurisdictions for their housing elements that they do as part of their comprehensive plans. And one of the key pieces of language in that change is that going forward, jurisdictions must plan for and accommodate housing that is affordable to all economic segments of the population. And by planning for and accommodating, the discussions we had as part of this effort is that we want to recognize that most of the housing that will be built in our communities, meet the needs we have over the next 20 years, will be done in the private sector. And jurisdictions have some role in that, but the main focus for this effort is that jurisdictions will need to demonstrate in their comprehensive plans that they have the policies and regulations in place that enable enough housing to be constructed to support residents who are at different income levels. And by all economic segments, this law and the guidance that have come out from it are pretty specific with who we're talking about. We're looking at levels of moderate, low, very low, and extremely low income households using definitions from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we're also looking at the need for emergency housing, emergency shelters, and permanent supportive housing. So a whole range of different housing types. We know that The new requirements are not the first step. They're building on a lot of great existing work that's ongoing in the region that has been done, including by this council. We talk about housing affordability in our countywide planning policies that guide how jurisdictions plan together in their comprehensive plans. There are many specific policies in the comprehensive plans of individual jurisdictions. Many of our jurisdictions have housing action plans, and we have the homeless crisis response plan. And all these plans have policies that promote housing affordable to people who have a range of incomes across all jurisdictions. The difference with the new legislation is that the requirement is that jurisdictions go beyond just planning for some amount of new affordable housing. They need to get really specific in coming up with numbers and understanding the need, kind of quantifying the need of housing at different income levels. And then they need to document in their comprehensive plans and demonstrating that their policies will help allow for housing that will meet those needs. I mentioned that the law is pretty specific when it talks about who we're planning for. It does look at different income categories based on the percent area median income, and I've provided some information there for what that looks like across the Thurston County region. And something I'll just highlight here is that we do have a category down at the bottom for and there will be in later slides that will show up that we show the amount of housing that will be needed for folks at the higher income level who are earning more than 120% of the area median income. And just to clarify that the law does not require cities and the county to plan for households that are earning above 120% AMI, but we do need to plan for the total amount of housing that's needed. And something we recognize in this work and has been discussed elsewhere is that we do need housing for folks at all incomes. And so when you see that remainder, it can look like a lot, but it's because it's not divided up as much as the lower income and moderate income categories, which are what we're really planning for. So just to make that note. And we also have a little bit of work just to provide a little context to that numbers about how those income levels relate to the types of people, the types of employment levels in our community. So what we know is that, and this is no surprise, is that the need for housing in our community across all our jurisdictions is great. And this chart shows the number of housing units that are currently available in our county that are affordable to different income groups. This is the housing we have on the ground and how it's distributed between those different income categories. So there are more than 121,000 homes in Thurston County as of 2020. And about 40% of those are affordable to low-income households, or those who are earning 80% of the area median income or less. And looking ahead, that need is only going to increase. TRPC projects that the county will add more than 54,000 new housing units between 2020 and 2045 to meet our growing population. So it's a significant increase, but as we know, we're a fast growing region. And so that's the housing we're going to need. So with this new law, the Washington State Department of Commerce developed some guidance and a number of tools to help us break that number into income brackets and provides us with estimates of the housing need by income group. And so the orange sections here are how that new housing would probably be divided across our country, across our county in the different income brackets. And what we see is in our region is that the need is especially acute for those lowest income households. We're looking at a need for a 70% increase in housing for very low income households and a 20-fold increase in the need for permanent supportive housing. When we look across the county is that a lot of our current housing stock falls in the 50 to 80% AMI, in the 80 or in the 80 to 100% AMI categories in the middle. And where we're really seeing the need are in those lower income categories.
Can I ask a question about this slide, or do you want us to hold questions till the end?
Chair, how do you like to do questions in this group?
Um,
I'm happy to take them.
It's up to your comfort level, Allison. We don't have a hard and fast rule, so if
Okay.
you'd like us to hold questions, let us know. If not,
I'm happy if you have a question about a slide, it would help clarify it. I'll do my best.
okay. Well, let's ask away, Michael.
Okay, I just think it's worth just like pausing and taking a beat and looking at that permanent supportive housing line, because we got a similar presentation to this, and thank you so much for presenting to the Tumwater City Council, similar to some of this data. And like that little sliver of blue in the permanent supportive housing line is like what exists today, right? And then that biggish bar of orange, which looks different, like it looks smaller than the 8,758 right below it, but it's so critical. Like I was just floored by this, because the amount of work that we're going to have to do to try to reach that number is immense. And it's just like a sobering reminder of like the challenge that's before us over the next couple of decades for that amount. So I guess like my question is more of like a comment than a question, but can you say again, like what the delta, like what percentage of increase we have to try to like come up with there? Like it's just staggering, that one little bar graph that we're going to have to try to meet that need.
Yeah, it's a 20 time over increase. It is,
yeah.
Those lowest categories, the permanent supportive housing categories, are really significant. And as we've been giving this presentation to different jurisdictions, I think it's eye-opening, and it's been eye-opening for us going through this process. And something I want to emphasize about this effort is that these are not targets. They're required to go through this process because of a change in state law. But really what it's doing is helping to articulate and bring into the focus what the need in our community is going to be going forward. And we all know that there is a need, and that the housing stock we have right now doesn't meet the need in our community. But these are they're still projections, so they're not completely fixed, but this is with the projections of population we're likely to have. This is likely the housing needs that those people will have. And so what this process is trying to really help shed light on is what kind of housing people in our community are going to need in the next few years if we want housing to be affordable for them. This is really what it will look like. And it is, you're right, it's really eye-opening, especially for you all. You're working, know how hard it is to get one project off the ground and all the way through the process. So it is worth taking a look at the scope.
Yeah, thank you.
Allison, could you also speak to the greater than 120% of AMI? Because that seems like a really big jump there as well.
Yeah, it is. And that goes back to what I mentioned at the beginning. One of the requirements we have for this process is that we have a total amount of housing allocated, and our allocations need to add up to that total. And so jurisdictions are only required to do planning for up to 100, the categories up to 120% AMI. And so you can think of that 120% AMI plus sort of the remainder. And I think what this highlights is this isn't, again, it's not a target of how much housing needs to exist for that sector, but it does highlight a couple of things. One is that we know that we need more housing at all income levels. Part of the housing issues we're seeing regionally is that there's just not enough supply for the demand, the population growth that we have been experiencing. And when people who are in higher incomes, when a product isn't available for them that they want, they move down the line to what is available, and that pushes the supply for other income levels. And so I think there is this process does kind of highlight that we do need housing at all income levels. The bulk of Thurston County's housing stock is really in the middle areas. And we don't have a ton that's at the real higher end, and we definitely don't have a lot that's at the lower end. And so that's why you see those larger numbers there. And they're not targets. It's not something we need to plan for or be building for as part of this requirement, but it gives you an idea of what the totals are.
Right. And I'm sure most of us saw the headline just the other day that housing prices in Thurston County are just continuing to shoot up, and despite some of the other market forces going on in other parts of the world. It just bears witness to what you're saying. Thanks, Allison.
Sure. So those are the countywide numbers and how they break out by income level. What we're required to do through this process is think about how those units should be distributed or allocated at the jurisdiction level to individual jurisdictions. And Commerce, the State Department of Commerce through this law allows jurisdictions some flexibility in how to do that allocation. The guidance is that our process needs to be multi-jurisdictional and collaborative. Everyone has to have a say in how that's done. And a requirement is that however we decide to distribute that housing need across our community, it needs to sum up to those countywide totals. We can't come up the total amounts. That's how much we need across our county. What we have discretion over is how the assumptions we want to build into where housing for people at different incomes should be located. So this is a brand new law, whole new thing. It's something lots of folks across Washington State are having to wrap their heads around. And locally, what happened is that staff from Thurston County and the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Yelm contracted with Thurston Regional Planning Council to provide some support to review the tools and existing information that were provided by the Department of Commerce, look at what other counties are doing, the ones who are a little ahead of us in the comprehensive plan process, work with those jurisdictions to reach consensus on a staff preferred allocation method. And that's what we did. We also invited our smaller Thurston County jurisdictions, so Tenino, Rainier, and Bucota to participate in this effort. And we had a bunch of meetings, worked through data and information, and came up with a staff recommended allocation method. And that's what we'll present today. The next steps in this process is that we're presenting the information to all the different jurisdictions that have participated and to this group. It is a new process, and so one thing we're trying to do is to kind of ratify it in some way. And so the next steps that the staff work group recommended is to have Thurston Regional Planning Council actually approve the staff recommended allocations, kind of give jurisdictions permission and kind of to use those allocations as they're moving ahead with their comprehensive plan updates. So we're looking at doing that early next year. Thurston Regional Planning Council already develops population projections and population allocations for all the jurisdictions that support the comp plan updates, and we developed the buildable lands analysis that looks at how that population kind of will look in a land use, land capacity sense. So it's really in our wheelhouse to do this kind of work, and so we've synced it up with that information as well. And then the next step will be for jurisdictions to document the allocations in their housing elements as part of their comp plan updates, and include any policies that will show how they're planning to meet the need that we've identified. So as a part of that planning effort, we met with jurisdiction staff a number of times, and at the beginning of it, we began with talking about what are our values, what are our shared values when it comes to thinking about how low-income housing, supportive housing should be distributed across our community. And the values we settled on to choose an allocation method is that folks wanted the method to be fair. And by fair, what they meant is that low-income housing should be distributed across all jurisdictions everyone in each jurisdiction should have some options available to them, whatever their income range. It shouldn't all be concentrated or in just one jurisdiction or just a few jurisdictions. At the same time, it's important that we recognize that there are differences among our jurisdictions and differences in their existing housing distribution. Folks also wanted to make sure that the method is pretty clear to communicate to public elected officials and to the public, that it uses methods that are trusted and also repeatable if we need to come back and do it again in the future, which we likely will need to do. It's likely to happen again as part of comp plan processes. And we wanted to make sure the method was cooperative, that it built on existing structures we already have in our region, including the regional housing council work, the way we do countywide planning policies. Most importantly, we wanted a method that was supported by all of our jurisdictional partners. And so I'm going to walk a little bit through the method options that we had to give you a sense of how the staff work group came to their preferred option. And to think about that, we have a very simplified example. So this example county, there are 2 communities, and the community on the top has more blue houses and the community on the bottom has more orange houses. So they have an unequal distribution of different housing types. The Department of Commerce developed 2 different methods that counties could choose from, or they could choose a hybrid. So method A, the first one, and in the future, for this county as a whole, we know that we'll need, to meet the housing needs, we'll need 4 more blue houses and 4 more orange houses total. So method A, offered by the Department of Commerce, says you should split that need up equally among the jurisdictions. Just keep it real clean, everyone gets an equal share. And so what that means is that each of these communities gets 2 orange houses and 2 blue houses. Overall, what you'll see is they will continue to have a disparity in the amount of orange houses. There'll be differences between the 2 communities, but the new housing, that distribution is split equally. Method B took a different approach and said you should also look at the existing housing stock. And so because the first community doesn't have many orange housing units now, it would get 4 orange housing units, and the other one gets all blue. And what that means is, even though the new housing is different between the 2, overall, they have the same proportions of orange and blue houses. So that's a really simplified example of the differences between the different methods. And philosophically, they were different. Are we only thinking about new growth, or are we thinking about what's already on the ground? And so some jurisdictions could choose to do a hybrid method. And so I should say the method A, that cleaner one, is the one that most counties have chosen so far who have gone through this process. So Pierce County and Kitsap County have selected method A. Method B, no communities have chosen to use because it ends up being a little complicated to do that in practice. It results in numbers that are a little bit challenging to work with. And so some counties have opted to do a hybrid method that puts together sort of the best of both methods. So Snohomish County and King County have opted to do a hybrid method that mostly starts with method A, but also considers some of the capacity that's already on the ground. And ultimately, the staff recommendation coming out of this process is to use a hybrid method. It's really, we liked the Snohomish County's method, and that is because it best met those values that we identified at the beginning of the process. This method is based on method A, an equal share of new housing units, new low-income housing units in all communities, but jurisdictions that already have a high proportion of lower income housing do get some credit.
I'm in a meeting. Yeah.
Do get a little bit of credit. And so the allocations are adjusted to provide some consideration for the housing stock that's already exists in each community. We're able to total all the individual jurisdiction allocations to meet the countywide need by income and by jurisdiction. And the process is relatively straightforward, will be easy for us to replicate in the future. So just to get in the numbers of what that looks like across the Thurston County area on the ground today, our housing supply, we have a little over 65,000 units in our cities, 20,000 in our UGAs, and about a little more than 35,000 in the rural area. And you can see how that's broken out by different income levels. And looking in the future, the housing need is that we would need around 33,000 housing units in cities, 13,600 in urban growth areas, and about 7,500 in the rural area. And these numbers already exist. They're already completed as part of TRPC's projection. But this is how those numbers would break out using that allocation method into different income groups. And so you can see the larger need that we'll have in cities and urban areas for permanent supportive housing, lower income housing. And they're kind of a complicated chart to look at, but another way to look at it is we look at how is that need distributed across our jurisdiction. So this is looking at all the housing allocations for folks in income levels between 0 and 50% area median income, and how that's distributed across our cities and urban growth areas. So you can see the greatest proportion of new housing, new lower income housing would be allocated to the city of Lacey, city of Olympia would be a little bit higher, followed by the city of Tumwater and the city of Yelm, with less of that housing allocated in other parts of the county. And that's relative to their population levels. So this housing allocation work is just the beginning. It's a small piece of a lot of new requirements in the Growth Management Act for housing elements, and jurisdictions will be picking this up as part of their comprehensive plan updates. And I'm not sure, Brad, were you going to talk a little bit about that part of it?
Yeah, I could start that, and then Ryan can fill in any details that I may miss. So as Allison mentioned, really the bulk of the work is ahead of us, and we've got it broken out into multiple phases and parts. The first one now that we're working with a housing allocation is identifying barriers and limitations to housing production as they exist right now. And then also there's two real components that are part of the requirements coming down from the state. The first is talking about housing production and ways to increase that. The other part is to really look at racially disparate impacts, displacements, and inclusion as part of the housing review process. So at the same time, we're looking at the barriers and limitations to housing production. We'll be looking at identifying policies and regulations that are contributing right now to racially disparate impacts and displacement and so forth. That theme will continue throughout the update process. So we'll have two tracks that will be informing each other. Next slide, please. As the second part of the effort is we will be looking at documenting programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability. And I think this is one place where I think we will be reaching out, the individual jurisdictions collectively or together, to the RHC and its RHC partners to sort of identify what programs there are out there right now, making sure that we have the current information, and then start to think about the next steps. What else do we need? What things can we do on the policy level to set the stage for the next part of that, of the implementation? Internally, on the city levels and county level, we'll be developing policies, objectives, and mandatory provisions for housing. We will be identifying and implementing similar policies and regulations to address and to begin to undo those racially disparate impacts that we identified in the first phase. And we'll be establishing new anti-displacement policies. So this is a pretty tall order of things to do as part of this process. But I think, again, this will be another really good opportunity to look for guidance from RHC and their partners. Next slide, please. That's it. It's simple. It will be done by the middle of 25, so or before.
Right. We'll have questions, comments of Allison and Brad.
I've got my hand up.
Oh, Danny, sorry, I didn't see that. Thanks.
Allison, long time no see.
I know.
And it's funny because right after you presented to Olympia City Council last night, I was like, oh wait, I did have a question, but here you are again. I'm curious about, so for area median income, I believe that said family size of 4, and AMI is dependent on the number of people in the household. Is that's correct, right?
Ooh, let's see. Quiz me on my AMI knowledge. Yes, I believe that is for a 4-person household. Yes.
So I'm curious because, I was just actually looking at TRPC's website, in terms of what is the average number of like people per household in Thurston County. And right now that's 2.5. So do you know why we landed on like using AMI for a 4-person household?
Yeah, we don't have a choice. These are the income breakouts that as part of this process that we are required to use.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. That's good to know. And I know that it adds a lot more complication when we start talking about AMI, because, we're building a lot of studio and 1-bedroom apartments in Olympia, which is part of our housing stock, but the AMI for those is going to be different because you could fit 4 people into those units, not comfortably, and maybe that's not allowed, but it just adds a lot more nuance for us to consider in terms of, the actual need in our communities. But it's good to start somewhere and have numbers in front of us to get a sense of the need. And if we're required to plan for 4-people households, we just have to remember that's not going to be the case for everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that we talked a little bit about these numbers are, we're working within the framework we have. It's not necessarily a perfect representation of our housing market and our housing needs, and we have different ways of doing that. I think that, and Ryan or Brad or anyone else can jump in if you have more thoughts about it on a jurisdictional level, how you think about that. I think it's important to think about, I don't think the breakouts change that much. I don't know that you need to I do think we'll need to think about what the specific or more appropriate housing type should be available, because obviously you have different household sizes for people at all income levels, but they aren't necessarily equally distributed.
Yeah, I'll just mention that, kind of in summary, I think the main takeaway for this exercise is that we need more types of housing for all income levels everywhere, right? So regardless of jurisdiction, regardless of housing type, regardless of income, we need more. And we need to plan for more. So I think that's the biggest takeaway. Don't get too caught up in the numbers, because I think it's the best we could do given the parameters of the assignment. But the main takeaway is that we need more of everything.
Here.
Yeah, and I echo Ryan's comments. The other interesting factor is that in the city of Tumwater, at least, our housing size has actually increased in the recent years. So, which is not what I would have predicted. But I think it also points to the fact that for all income levels, we need units of all sizes. Again, because the families don't necessarily concentrate in one; they're all across all. So, however we allow for that, it will be a mixture of market and other planning in the future to deal with how this all works out. But I think we just need to be as flexible as we can in our policies to set that up.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, just to illustrate this, AMI for a family of fours, I think it's at 102,000 a year. Let's take that 2.5 average that we have for Thurston County right now for household size. Like for a 3-person household, it's 92,000 a year. That's AMI. 2-person is 82,000 a year. And so like yes, we shouldn't get too much into the numbers, and we know we've got to build lots and lots of housing for all levels and all household sizes, but it does shift the columns around more if we're, talking about, 80 to 100% AMI versus 100 to 120, et cetera. So just wanted to note that just for us all to ruminate on.
Thanks, Danny. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Looks like Gary. See you.
Yeah, I'm just following up on the fact that we need lots and lots of housing of all types creates for us, when we've been looking at our housing action plan, it creates the dilemma of how do you incentivize building affordable housing when you can sell market rate housing as soon as it's built. And so we're focusing on trying to figure out what are going to be the most effective incentives to make that seem desirable.
Good point. Thank you. Anybody else? All righty. Well, Allison, thank you so much for taking on a dual role today and pinch hitting and giving us lots to think about. And I trust Lacey will be visited soon.
Tomorrow night, Carolyn.
Tomorrow night, yes.
You can give the presentation tomorrow.
There you go. No. I'll sit there and applaud. All righty. Well, thanks so much. We really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you very soon. Righty. Next up is the manufactured home park update. And it looks like Jacinda is going to lead us on that one.
Good evening, Regional Housing Council and jurisdiction, and those who are joining us online. I will share, but also invite, there are several of you that might have more to add, so feel free, obviously, to do so. And I am on one screen, so pardon my shifting stuff around here. Wanted to make sure I kind of captured everything because there's been a lot that's gone on around this issue. So just as a little bit of background, earlier this year, there was some state legislation that was passed that made it a requirement that owners of manufactured or mobile home parks, provide notice when they intend to sell those communities. Several of us on staff and maybe several of Regional Housing Council members as well are signed up to get those notifications. So that's kind of setting the stage here. Once that notification is given, then the community members, the residents of the park, have approximately 70 days to put together essentially a package to purchase, a financial package, and to submit that offer. So with that background, in September and October timeframe, the Regional Housing Council jurisdictional staff reviewed our respective housing action plans, and out of that exercise, identified some items that could benefit from Regional Housing Council, elevating it to Regional Housing Council. So a policy or program to preserve manufactured mobile home parks was one of those items. And then pretty much at the same time that we were doing that, we had Victoria from Northwest Cooperative Development Center kind of ping staff and say, hey, we have a park. We got a notice, and Northwest Cooperative Development Center is working with residents when they want to purchase. So Victoria was hoping to find a way to help a certain park purchase, and I will provide some more information about that a little bit later here. So we had those two things going on kind of simultaneously. And that initiated kind of a subgroup, including some regional housing council members and some staff that were really focused on that specific park, Claudia's Estates, but also just keeping in mind that, again, we need a regional approach and a policy or a program, and that was something the Regional Housing Council directed staff and the advisory boards to work on. So from here, or excuse me, I do want to add that you all had talked and we all had talked in some length about such a program taking into consideration the risk of a given park becoming unaffordable to its residents, whether that be by conversion to a different use or it being sold and rents being increased beyond an amount that residents could afford, therefore, causing displacement. And we also talked about wanting to, with our limited amount of funding available to potentially help, wanting to make sure that we are looking at potential parks that need or could need some help in purchasing in an equitable way. So considering potentially things like racial or ethnic composition, if those residents are overrepresented in our homeless crisis response plan, if the park, the condition of the housing, the mobile or manufactured homes, wanting to make sure that those are healthy and safe homes for residents, average income of residents, access to other available sources, and a variety of other things. So kind of keeping those things in mind. So since the last time we have met, the Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board has talked a little bit about this issue. Again, some of us met specific to Claudia's. And then tomorrow, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is meeting and will consider making a recommendation in terms of an actual funding amount or percentage to be set aside or potentially set aside annually for purchases of parks. And of course, that is recognizing again that we have limited funding. Our funding would not compromise, in I would imagine all cases, the asking price or the purchase price, but would be potentially a sliver. So additionally, from here and tomorrow, the board, so the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is meeting tomorrow, and the Homeless Services Advisory Board. There's wonderful staff, or wonderful, community members on those boards that have just great knowledge and skill sets that could really help us. And we recognize that. So an invitation to the boards to participate in a work group to form a policy or program will be issued this month. And then, whoever wishes to kind of volunteer to help put together a policy program, that would then be elevated to Regional Housing Council. So within the next 2 months, or I would imagine, the next few months, you all will be seeing a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Advisory Board regarding more of a funding amount or percentage or a set aside. And then additionally, potentially a little bit further out, a policy or program to be recommended to help preserve parks. And then I do want to make sure that I circle back to Victoria and Claudia's estate. We talked a lot about that in the last few meetings and wanted to catch you all up on that conversation as well. So after Victoria met with us in November, we had talked about her potentially putting in an offer with kind of a conditional letter for funding. So she did put in an offer on behalf of the residents of that park to purchase the park. And then, simultaneously, some of us met to talk about like a buy down of interest versus a flat amount that we could potentially provide. And essentially got to this place where we said, we really need to know if the seller is even going to accept an offer from the community that is living there before we can really move much further. Victoria did get back to us a few weeks ago now, I think, and let us know that there was another offer and the seller was kind of debating both. And then she got back to us again and said that the other offer was a comparable offer in terms of purchase price. But in terms of timeline and how fast they could purchase, it was a shorter timeline, and the seller thus far has chosen to go with that other offer, which is disappointing, of course. But Victoria has also said, for some reason, if things change, she will certainly loop back to us. So on one front, it's disappointing, but I think on another front, we are not kind of put in, or you all are not put in this kind of position to make some fast decisions. So we have some time, hopefully, to work on a program or policy and try to get it right. So again, Claudia's right now is kind of off the table for the moment. But again, just to remind you all, I believe when Victoria visited us last, she shared a little bit of information about the number of sales. I think she said there was like 11 parks that had come up for sale this year. And she was seeing a lot and anticipating a lot of those to be occurring in Thurston. And she had mentioned that there was a Tumwater Park as well that had just been, a notice had just went out. So we could potentially hear more from her on that park, that one in Tumwater. And in the meantime, again, that subgroup is working on a policy program, and the Affordable Housing Advisory Board will shortly be elevating a recommendation for funding amounts or percentages and how that money could potentially be made available. And that was a lot. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Is there anything, do we know anything about the buyers of Claudia's and what may happen?
Carolyn, I put that in my notes and I forgot to mention it. We don't. Victoria may at this point, but it was a private, buyer. So staff does not have access at this point to who the buyer is or what is planned for the park.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else let's see, we've got a question from Danny.
Oh, not a question. I want to thank staff for taking a moment to look in to see if there's something that we could do in this situation and our due diligence. And unfortunately not in this case, but I just want to offer my gratitude to putting a little time behind what if we could have helped at Claudia's, but it also helped bring some information forward that will help feed this process for developing a policy on how we work on this issue regionally.
Thanks, Danny. Anybody else have a question or comment? Michael?
Yeah, I'd echo Danny's thanks for staff to looking into this and working on it. My question about the policy is is that also going to look at how we treat these things when they come off cycle? Because part of this problem here is if we have set aside that's part of our regular funding allocation process, but we get a notice midsummer and we only have 70 days to respond to it, how does that sort of fit into the puzzle piece of how we can be responsive to emerging issues like this?
Yes, great question, Michael. And I should have mentioned that. So the board tomorrow, what is in front of them is a consideration for, so annually, around that February timeframe is when we release, the county essentially releases the request for proposals for capital funding. And we've talked a lot about out of cycle and what happens when things pop up out of cycle. So what the advisory board, the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, is considering tomorrow is of that total amount that usually goes out in February, what amount or what percentage do they want to set aside for out of cycle? Does out of cycle include manufactured mobile home park purchase? And if it doesn't, how much is associated with an out of cycle for, say, an emergency or acquisition that pops up, and how much would be recommended for manufactured mobile home parks? Right now, the staff liaison's recommendation to the board, which they will again talk about it tomorrow, is to separate those two. So there'll be an opportunity fund for emergencies and acquisitions, and a separate fund associated just with mobile manufactured home parks. And certainly I can update you all after the board has considered that tomorrow, and it'll come forward with the RFP recommendation before the RFP goes out in February. But we are thinking about it.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have comments or questions? All righty. I'll add my thanks as well, and I'm really sorry that we couldn't help the Claudius residents, but I think we're on a good path forward to be prepared to, I hate to use the word intervene, but to respond when there are similar situations arise in the future. And I really love that we're taking a regional approach to this. So thank you. And thank Tumwater for the work they've already done on tenants' rights and mobile home parks. So I think we can all benefit from their work. Alrighty. Not seeing any other hands raised. It's time for the tech team update. And it looks like Darian is on for that.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cox. Yeah, just a few updates. Two more of housekeeping things. That the Franz Anderson ILA has now been to every jurisdiction and has been approved by every jurisdiction. Way to go. So much admin work and coordination, but those ARPA dollars primarily and general fund dollars too, but now are all under contract, and we've kind of averted this clawback situation. So it can still happen, of course, but they're under contract, and that makes it feel more secure. So just a big kudos to that being secured, tied to permanent supportive housing. That huge 3,500 number that we saw today will be addressed by 70 plus units. So way to go, everyone. And way to go, Jacinda, coordinating all that. It was a ton of work, but we did it, and it's like a regional project, a bona fide regional project. So I know this is like the first step and many more to come, when they break ground and stuff, but it just feels like a milestone. So yay to all those being signed. The next ILA that was signed last night, the Quinn Street Village ILA, between the county and the city to support ARPA funding for Quinn Street Village. That was also signed last night. Really just have a lot of gratitude for that, and excited that we're able to support Quinn Street Village in that way. So it's two administrative things that I wanted to report on. The next thing is just reporting on right-of-way progress. I know that we came to you all and talked to you about our right-of-way proposal and the full budget that we were asking Commerce for. And that, theoretically got supported with all of our requests except one. So just a reminder, there were two purchases included in the request, one for 15 unit apartments and another one for a hotel in Olympia. And the apartment buildings were no longer up for sale when we started negotiations with Commerce. So unfortunately, we couldn't purchase those. However, the motel is moving forward. An offer was placed, that was accepted, and now Interfaith Works is moving through the due diligence process. So really excited about that. Quinn Street Village was supported, and New Hope, the 8 tiny home units at our First Christian Church. The full operations there are being supported by Commerce and add 8 more beds to our right-of-way initiative. So really excited that those 3 projects are moving forward. And I'm just really excited for Interfaith. This is their like a housing project for them. And they've been doing really great stuff in the community for a long time. And now they're about to like own and operate this building. So I'm just really stoked for them and excited to see this get to the other side. So just good news, really good news. And then the next thing is talking about the comprehensive plan update. I know that we're all in the throes of comp plan updates right now. And this is to say, just to share that with the unit count work that was done by TRPC, that was like a regional kind of analysis. And we're looking to move forward with taking that analysis and figuring out how we are going to plan for that in our next comp plan update. And then to say, we are also looking at doing a regional displacement study. So there's now 3 new elements in the comprehensive plan update where we have to look at displacement and how it's impacting communities of color and how it's impacting other marginalized identities and what cities are going to do to account for that. So Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater right now, and we just spoke to Gary before this, potentially Yelm are going to move forward with an RFP to find a consultant to look at displacement from a regional perspective and see how we can account for that in our comp plan update. So hopefully we'll have that RFP live by the end of the year, can bring a consultant on board, and Olympia will take the like administrative lead and we'll be able to again kind of have TRPC like they did tonight, have another consultant come and talk about what we can do and how we can continue to weave those goals and those strategies through the Regional Housing Council and address them in tandem. So I'm just excited that we're able to get to a spot where we can work on that displacement piece together during our times of the comprehensive plan update. So those are the 4 things I had, and can answer any questions.
Questions for Darian? I can see a thumbs up from Michael. Yay. Well, that's a whole lot of good news in one short report, Darian. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Is there anything else from tech team? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Darian. And now we'll move on to updates from our advisory boards. Let's see, Tom and Keely will be leading that.
Yes. We have both our chair and our vice chair here.
Yes.
And I know that our Tammy was not able to make our executive meeting, which we held last week with the chairs and vice chairs and then the staff liaisons supporting the advisory boards. So I'm wondering if I could just kick it right over to Kaven and to Talana if you'd like.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm here if you need any memory jogging.
Okay.
Leading, and then I'll defer to Kaven for the details of some things. And so we actually met as an executive team for the first time to the executive members from each committee to talk about collaboration as advisory boards. And what we talked about at this meeting was we went through the board recruitment process and talked about ways to kind of streamline them so they're in alignment with the other board and there's consistency in that process, and throw out some ideas. That was one thing, right, Kaven? Talked about that, right? And then the next was gosh, I can't remember. What was the first topic we were on for a long time? Not the interview process, but what, Kaven? Can't remember.
Well, we talked about not just our interview process, but what it looks like for us to uniformly bring on new members to the board, and specifically what identities we wanted to have fill those boards. And I also talked about what kind of role we would want to see the RHC play in that recruitment process.
And thank you, Haven. And then we also threw the idea out about having a committee from each board be kind of over that process of folks who wanted to commit to doing that. And yeah, I think that was a very important piece. And that's about it. As far as updates. And then we plan on meeting again in the future.
And I think both boards are really working through their individual work plans to prepare ourselves for the mid-cycle funding request. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge that we're gaining from the tech team, as well as really taking advantage of our individual areas of expertise, since the majority of us have a combination of lived experience and direct service experience.
Wonderful. And hopefully it won't be such a fire hose this time.
One last thing I wanted to add, Carolyn, is that the importance for each of the boards we want to be consistent about our values and what we prioritize. And so that's really a focus and in all the work that we're doing. But Tom and Jacinda and Alex have all given us a lot of good information to work with going into this next funding cycle. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we're just thank you both so much. Alex and I also started working on a timeline for what would it take for us to have applications go out, applications reviewed, interviews, appointments in time for the RFP review. And last year we started around January 3rd by putting applications out, and it will have to be a similar kind of timeline in order to make mid-March appointments. So we're working on that timeline, and we'll be bringing it back to the advisory boards.
Thanks, Keely. Does Tammy have anything she wants to contribute to this, or don't want to leave her out?
So I don't have anything to contribute this time. My father passed away, and so I had missed the past meeting. I do want to say that at our last HSAB meeting, we did talk about kind of an extra role, including maybe doing 5-year plan updates and stuff like that. We really look at this group as a working group. And so I'm excited about all the work that we do get to do. And we did make a timeline of how to not only do the RFP, but maybe a timeline of what we're going to do at each meeting going forward, which really I think will help us prepare for what's coming.
Thanks, Tammy, and I'm certainly sorry for your loss.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jacinda?
You go. Sorry. Just wanted to quickly add, I don't recall, we might have already shared, I apologize. We have talked a little bit about Alex, and I don't think that she is on today. But Alex, there we go. Tom is here. Tom, do you want to share about Alex, or can I I don't know that we've shared that Alex is stepping into the advisory board role and what her role will be with the county.
Yeah, it was my fault. I didn't invite Alex, so we'll have her in future meetings, and I was going to do during good order. So just a quick announcement. We have Alex Purse. We have brought on to our team as a affordable housing program manager. So that's a position we've been recruiting for the last several months. So excited to have Alex. There's Alex.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
So she will, working with Jacinda, Alex will be our staff liaison to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board.
Great.
Carolyn, may I add one more very brief thing?
Please.
When the executive team from both boards met last week, and the liaisons, One of the other things we talked about related to the application process was recognizing that the boards are doing a lot of really important work. And I think the application that we used last year, we tried to estimate how much time board members would roughly be dedicating to their time on the boards. And it's feeling like we were a little bit off, with so many funding rounds and unexpected things. So part of that application that will be kind of released for filling empty spots, we do plan to call attention to the fact that, meetings are right now maybe once a month. I think the Homeless Services Board might be meeting twice a month. But that those could be 90 to 120 minutes or even beyond, because there's, just every meeting is a very packed agenda, and the members are doing wonderful things, and it's we're cramming stuff in. So being very transparent in the commitment that is required to be on the board. And from board members, we appreciate you all.
Thank you. It is a lot of work. All right. So let's see, where are we? Looks like we're at Housing Trust Fund information with Darian and Jacinda.
Hey, thank you, Chair Cox. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. So, I'm going to go over the Housing Trust Fund applications just at a high level. It's a pretty complex system, and I think that it's just really beneficial for our housing council to know the process and how it's going, and just get an overall update of projects going to the trust fund through Thurston County. So I just thought it'd be a time to share with you all an update on the Housing Trust Fund, primarily because the announcements for the Multifamily Housing Trust Fund applications were supposed to be announced on Friday, and we got news last week that announcement is being punted until mid-January. So we were hoping to know more, or at least know for sure by Friday, but that's not the case anymore. So I just want to walk through what that means, and just an update on projects. Okay, so multifamily applications. Commerce received 87 applications, totaling about $440 million for 6,000 units of affordable housing. And there's 290 million available. So this means a lot of the projects that applied are going to be funded. And this link is in the PowerPoint that you all can open up, and it's I had this first in the slides, but it's really hard to see because the print is so small. But I just want to bring this number and talk about just how stark it is, especially when we hear the unit counts that we need in our community. We talked last night at our city council that with the units that we have in the Housing Trust Fund right now, there's close to 200 units. And so that doesn't feel like a lot, knowing the 3,000 mark is among us. However, 200 units of below 50% AMI housing is a lot of units that we have prepared in our community in the pipeline. But we feel that one, maybe two of our projects will be funded. So Thurston County has 5 projects that have been submitted. A project from Foundation for the Challenged for 15 units. The Housing Authority, Homes First, Interfaith Works, and TWG, and then Lehigh, the Franz Anderson project, totaling about $25 million. So we have 200 units prepped, but we foresee one, maybe 2 projects receiving the funding amount that they need in order to move forward through the housing tax credit process. And now for the home ownership applications. Again, this link is included in the presentation. These were due in October. There were 48 applications looking for $94 million. looking to create 943 units of affordable home ownership. And this is a really stark increase from the in the total funds that was allowed in 2022. And so this is great because we're seeing a lot more affordable home ownership projects in our community, but the funding need to match these projects just aren't there. And so for the home ownership projects, there are 3 submissions from Thurston County: Habitat for Humanity, the Boulevard Project, a second Habitat for Humanity project, Longmire Phase 2, and then Thurston Housing Land Trust for a total request of $13 million. So that's just, it was just an update to let you all know that typically we would be reporting now or close to now which projects that came out of Thurston County received the Housing Trust Fund allocation, which one we maybe foresaw being able to achieve those light tax credits. But we don't know that yet. It's not going to happen until January. And we're just seeing projects in Thurston County compete against themselves for finite funding. And so that's going to change request for the countywide home fund, and then just projects viability to be able to continue in 2024 at all. Just to know what he got.
Just wanted to share that the home ownership NOFA, there was 40 million that was made or is made available. So 94 million in requests, 40 million available. So great to see lots of requests and lots of units that want to happen, but not nearly enough money. And then those awards as of now are still anticipated around December 22nd. We haven't heard from Commerce that the homeownership awards will be pushed back, but that is a potential. And then the other thing that, the other 2 things I wanted to share, the next kind of state funding process was the 9% low-income housing tax credits. That application was due in November, and we should be hearing back late January, February on those. Typically Commerce and the WSFIC Finance Commission try to coordinate so that they're funding projects that also have local funding and you know, kind of stacking funding. And then the last thing I wanted to share is that staff from the jurisdictions are meeting with Commerce tomorrow around the multifamily NOFA. Commerce reached out about those 5, thank you, those 5 projects. You know, lots of units and pretty big requests, and at least 2 of those exceed the cap, the maximum cap of 5 million. There was a waiver, but we have big requests. So Commerce is looking for us to kind of weigh in on community priorities and just share a little bit more about the projects. Jurisdictionally, we decided because Regional Housing Council and the boards haven't officially kind of ranked or prioritized one project over another, that the only project we feel we could really say is a priority is Lehigh's Franz Anderson Permanent Supportive Housing, because that is a regional project. And then these other ones, we'll just be sharing how they align with housing action plans or needs assessments, you know, the populations they serve and kind of the gaps that they're filling in our community. But I think this is an indicator that Commerce is, you know, they're overprescribed and they've got some really difficult decisions to make. And some of these that don't get funded, we will likely see coming back around in a few months for our home fund.
Thanks, Jacinda. Any questions about this? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, well, we'll wait with bated breath to see what comes through on that. Hopefully it'll be good news for us. Elisa, you have communications update for us?
Yes, hello. For communications, the end of the year, the tech team and I will be putting together a 2023 summary of the Rights of Way initiative to kind of show, highlight what's happened over the year and what's coming up next year. So that's just a heads up that we'll have that out around mid-January. That's all I have.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, well, next up is good of the order. And I've got a couple of things, but want to check in with council members to see if anybody else has something. Danny?
Yeah, since we met last, we've had a couple of big things come through the Olympia City Council. Right after our last meeting, we voted on a rental housing registry program. And so in Olympia, all rental housing units will need to register with the city. And we are going to phase in doing inspections of rental units, housing and safety inspections once every 5 years. So big body of work by our staff that we're glad has made its way through. And so if anybody has any questions around the details of that, how the program's going to function, how we structured it, why we structured it that way, I'd be happy to chat with anybody. Also, just last night, we voted on a restructure and expansion of the multifamily tax exemption. It will once all the second reading happens and the implementation of this goes forward, the MFTE will now be applicable in all of the areas where we want high density housing. So it's already existed downtown. It'll also go along our urban corridors and out to the east and west triangle areas. And also we're piloting using it in 4 neighborhood centers. The restructure of it is that the default option is the 12-year multifamily tax exemption. And instead of that being 20% of the units affordable to 115% AMI and below, all of them will have to be affordable to 80% AMI and below. And that's going to be stacked and layered with the other various incentives that we offer for affordable housing. If a developer wants to opt out of the 12-year and use the 8-year, they will have to pay an in lieu fee. We had a market analysis done by Echo Northwest. And so just looking at the cost to build housing in our downtown area and the east side triangle area. When I say the triangle, you know, where Pacific and Martin come together like that. Those will be a 5% in lieu fee on the total exemption value. And in the west side triangle area, so Capitol Mall, it'll be a 25% in lieu fee. And that will go into our home fund to be able to support affordable housing projects. We're also adding the 20-year MFTE for home ownership opportunities. And by piloting this in 4 neighborhood centers that we've chosen, Habitat for Humanity will be able to use it for that Boulevard Road project, which is really exciting. We're also going to be generally revamping like just the administration of this program. We also raised the fees that we charge for the use of this program to be more aligned with how other cities are charging those fees. Apparently we were entirely too cheap in terms of our fees. But we're also going to be updating our website to help people understand this program, provide some transparency around how it's getting used, who's using it, what that means in terms of the tax exemption that the developers receive and how that shifts around based on, you know, property assessments and, you know, who ends up, you know, paying and how much over time for these tax exemptions, just so that, you know, we as a city understand how the tax shift works, and people in the community will be able to understand that as well. So also a really big body of work from our staff that we've got over the finish line. It's been a big year for us in Olympia in terms of these kinds of initiatives. And again, if anybody ever wants to chat with the way we've restructured this program and why we've chosen to do it the way we've done it, I'm happy to chat with anybody.
Okay, great. Thanks, Danny. Anybody else? Okay, all right. Well, I have a proposal or two here. The first is, I'm feeling like it's time to return to in-person meetings with a hybrid option for those who, you know, may be time constrained to get here. But I wanted to check the sentiment from the rest of the council members. I saw a thumbs up from Clark. Carolina, Michael.
I've got
Dan?
a question about that. We've talked about doing in person every other meeting, and there's been meetings where we're like, oh, the room that we needed isn't available. Logistically, do we have what we need to meet in person?
Well, that should be part of the conversation for sure. I know that, the atrium commissioners meeting room isn't always available. Tom, do you have any thoughts you'd like to contribute on that?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think we do need to look at that for the year. So we didn't have room available for today because of board budget meeting. So I think we can look forward for next year in the schedule. And we can look to see if we can secure that meeting room, or whether we can look for alternate meeting rooms. But I think it's a fair question. We have a couple meetings scheduled in the atrium in the boardroom that we had to reschedule and go to virtual. So I think that's something that we will look into to confirm the availability of that room and whether we can get that on a consistent basis.
All righty. I don't have a definitive okay on this, but I think Lacey also could be an option if there's difficulty with the county meeting spaces. I know before we had to go Zoom, Lacey previously hosted the council meetings, so and parking options would be a little bit easier there too, but just laying that on the table and seeing how people feel.
I think that's fine. I would manage expectations for my own ability to make it in person during the first 2 to 3 months of the year. But I think going back to in-person meetings sounds good.
Okay, so all meetings with a hybrid option?
So long as there's a hybrid option, especially for staff flexibility.
Right, okay. Carolina, are you on and hearing us?
Yeah. Yep, I can hear you just fine. For guests, I think if we book the room ahead of time, it would be easier for staff here at the atrium to have the room prepared. I know that sometimes there are conflicting meetings, especially with our commission meetings, or I believe there's other groups that use it as well, the Law and Justice Council, and I believe the BHO uses it as well. So sometimes that might be a conflict, but if we are able to kind of set a schedule ahead of time, it will leave staff here at the atrium enough time to get that booked and prepared.
So I would just add that ahead of time is way ahead of time, because the Planning Commission uses that room, the Heritage Committee, there are quite a few of our advisory committees that use that room. So I think they're already booking in 2024. So if you're interested in the boardroom at the atrium, you need to let us know.
Yeah, Tom, is there a possibility you could work with Jamie and kind of give her the schedule? And I think she'll be able to give you an idea if there's some times that are already booked out and that wouldn't work. And that way we can make alternate plans at that time.
Yeah, happy to do that. And I know Cody's already started to have some conversations with Jamie, and I just can't remember where we're at right now. But yeah, we'll definitely follow up and check with Jamie on that schedule.
All righty. Great. So I guess our January meeting is scheduled to be, is it scheduled to be in person or Zoom?
It is in person on the agenda.
Oops, one at a time.
Sorry, it is scheduled to be in person. I talked to Jamie
and it should be set. However, February, when I booked it, was already taken. So we already ran into some complications with that, but January should be good for in person.
Okay, great. Well,
Robin, I'm wondering, would the training room be an availability?
Yes, we should look at the training room.
Okay, so we also have a training room at the atrium. And that might be a possibility that could work. I'll have Tom or Cody, if you can kind of loop Robin and Jamie in, we can possibly get that set up as well.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Great, thank you.
great. So it sounds like we got good options, and hopefully we'll get our locations nailed down. The other thing I wanted to propose is, or just ask, is, you all nicely accommodated Lacey because of our Thursday council meetings by having RHC meetings on Wednesday. But now Lacey's city council is changing its meeting dates to Tuesdays. So I know Wednesdays tend to be pretty busy. Is there any sentiment at all for switching our regional housing council meetings to Thursdays? And if there's not, that's fine. I just wanted to let you all know that's opening up in Lacey. So, Danny?
We do tend to have some committee meetings on Thursdays in Olympia, which doesn't mean it couldn't work out. I just know that, our land use committee meetings are generally on a Thursday. This year it was the 4th Thursday. Last year it was the 3rd Thursday. I guess my request would be, like, if we can hold the 24th in January, we'll know our schedule in Olympia then. And if we want to talk about other days, that's a possibility. But I mean, at this point, like, even the 25th in January may be a land use committee meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. And again, no expectations at all, and we'll go with whatever the majority want to do. I just wanted to let you all know that, from Lacey's standpoint, there's more flexibility now. So
Wednesdays work, I think, particularly good for us on my end. But if there's a desire to look at Thursdays, we could do that potentially, but Wednesdays are pretty nice for us.
Okay, good. All right, just raising the question. There's always going to be a conflict with something. So, okay. I guess we can talk about this again after assignments are made, and if we want to stick with Wednesdays, we'll stick with Wednesdays. Are there any other questions, comments for good of the order? Okay, well, seeing none, wish everybody happy holidays, whatever it is you celebrate, and we'll see you again in January. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.